So once again, welcome to Collaborative Relearning. I'm Glo, one of the coordinators for ACAN Scotland.
Good idea.
I'd appreciate that if you're not speaking or a speaker, to turn off your microphones. That would allow things to proceed nicely. Or if you don't mind, the back of house will turn off the microphones for you. Please do introduce yourself in the chat. Say something about climate emergency that you're really concerned about, or most concerned about. Tonight's event is entitled Collaborative Relearning. So this event is about collaboration and taking action together. So speaking with those outside our silos between different industries, as well as government and agencies to work on climate emergency, that is the only way to do it better from where we are now. Many of us have worked in different arenas over the last 30 years on climate change. We're not moving fast enough if we're to make appreciable changes. So ACAN, Architects Climate Action Network, is a voluntary group. Although started by architects, we don't just consist of architects. We welcome all who are interested in our living environment to join us. Just like any other voluntary groups, there are a limited number of volunteers. Each volunteer only has a finite amount of time. So while efforts may well be duplicated in different groups or organizations, as all the individuals work really hard separately, we can certainly achieve more in a shorter space of time if we collaborate. And to the relearning part, the Archifringe overarching theme of unlearning asks us to interrogate our beliefs, behavior, and biases. Although apt in that we have to get rid of bad habits, we, ACAN Scotland, want to put this in a positive spin in relearning, reimagining how it could be and will be. Because there's always a lot we can learn from each other. And we hope that we can foster cross-pollination of knowledge to enhance our efforts and find out how we can effectively use everyone's talents and knowledge in the appropriate way for a true and effective climate action network. So the conversation really needs a diverse input from a wide network, real engagement of every topic from retrofit to ecology, from education to policy. We're looking for cultural transformation in landowners, clients, developers, planners, politicians, those working with urban and rural landscape biodiversity, forestry and farming practices, regulations, and so on, it can go on. All needs to be brought out for some joined up rethinking to maximize efforts and positive climate effect. So most importantly, we are looking at positive actions that can be taken forwards. We can. Indeed, what steps and scale of influence can we engender in the coming months and years? How are we going to do it? So that is the conversation we want to have with you tonight, and hopefully continue onwards into the future, proactively responding to climate and ecological breakdown in urban and rural environments. So first up, I'd like to invite Sam Turner from ACAN UK, who will give us a little bit of a background on what ACAN does and how we operate, followed by Vary Grant, the other ACAN Scotland coordinator, on potential seeds for change in the Scottish context that needs nurturing and taken to fruition. Sam, over to you.
Hey, Glo, thank you for that. I wasn't quite ready, but here we go. I'm just going to start screen sharing. Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Great. So I'm stepping in last minute to explain this. So apologies, I'm not fantastically well prepared, but hopefully I'll ramble through. And I'm based in London, and it's where we sort of started. So, but the intention is that we're sort of branching out and spreading across the world. So this is part of that. And hopefully I'll just give a brief sort of run through of where we started, how we operate, and sort of some of the things that are going down south of the border. So this is just a picture from our first architects assembly. I think we all know now that the world's on fire. We all know that there's more carbon in our atmosphere now than there has been for 800 million years. And that all of the data science says that we've warmed the planet by 1 degree already, and it's on trend to go even far further. I personally don't want to live on a 4-degree planet, so I want to do as much as I can to mitigate that, and hopefully everyone here is on the same page. So whiz through this, we know that we need to keep the planet below 1.5 degrees, lest we start triggering some tipping points that could put us into a spiraling decline on the planet. So everyone here, I think, probably knows all of that. We know that there have been many COP meetings and summits and all these pledges and promises, but the bottom line is our carbon emissions are still accelerating. They're not declining yet, they're accelerating. So our school kids are on the streets striking, and we're having civil disobedience to try and bring our leaders to this problem to their attention. And that's where ACAN really started. So on Waterloo Bridge in the April 2019 XR uprising, 3 young architects met, knowing all of this history, and decided to do something about it. We know that we're responsible for 40% of CO2 emissions, and we have this passion that we want to tie into our professional work. So ACAN stands there between our professional expertise and experience and our contacts, and that personal individual activism that we want to take part in to move our society forwards. So this is the only slide I'll read out, but for those of you who can't see it properly, this is our mission statement. So ACAN exists to address the way our built environment is made, operated and renewed in response to the climate emergency. As a network of individuals, we channel personal energy, expertise and action towards a common goal, the systemic change of our profession and the construction industry as a whole. We see this as a matter of urgency. Our mission is to mobilize a new movement of professional activists towards this goal by building an open, supportive and inclusive organization. ACAN empowers individuals to proactively seek change and facilitates collective effort through a shared platform built on collaboration. The next slides are all a bit text heavy, and you can read all about it on the website if you haven't already, if you've not been part of ACAN previously. But our 3 aims are to decarbonize now, to promote ecological regeneration and cultural transformation. And we do this in a number of ways, but always behind this is a set of values and principles to how we operate. And these are essentially radical, open honesty, systemic change, focusing on action, being honest and working together. That we understand that working collaboratively will get us far further. So you can read those all at your leisure on the website. And again, we work as this self-organizing, distributed, non-hierarchical system. So we have distributed authority. People in the organization write mandates for themselves, for their role, or for a group and its role. And through this decentralized decision making, we hope to have a very transparent platform that everyone can get involved with, can see what is happening around the rest of the network, but can also find a space, their niche and their role that they want to occupy, and then sort of expand from. So with that, hopefully we're gathering together all these experts and all these interested individuals from across the industry, and we're becoming this big fish that can chase the other thing, the existing big fish. And trying to draw that as a network is just a nightmare. We've had several iterations of this organization diagram, but this is the best one to date, I think. And you can see that above ground, we have these thematic groups. Come on to those in a moment. They build campaigns and hold events such as this one. And there'll be the things that you come across as a member of the public or the industry that hasn't got involved. But behind that, there's this network of movement support and the steering group that is hopefully tying all that together and making sure that we're all sort of pointed in the same direction, not working against each other. So all those thematic groups come together for regular meetings. We share resources, we share interesting links or articles or jobs that are available, and hopefully build those connections that we all have and expand our own personal network of connectivity. So these thematic groups are themed around 9 areas of sort of interest in the industry at the moment. So the circular economy, education, embodied carbon, existing buildings, carbon literacy, policy, planning policy, professional standards, where the wild things aren't, and our newest group, natural materials. And each of them is at a different level, engaging in different activities around the network, around the industry, trying to sort of tackle those problems. So I know I don't have to worry too much about embodied carbon because that group is doing a stellar job, and I can feed in where I can. Or if you're really focused on embodied carbon, you can go and live in that group and do the best work you can. And so hopefully there's a group for everyone at the moment, but we're open to more, and they will sort of grow and expand organically, hopefully. So what it really looks like is lots of meetings. They used to be in person, but now, thanks to technology, they're more often online. And we sort of meet to discuss things, to form plans, to critique the campaigns that we're running, and to plan actions. Because ultimately that's what it's about. It's about creating this change. So some of these actions are on the streets, outside the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government or the Architecture Registration Boards. But a lot of them are more subtle campaigns, responding to consultations, building reports, running events, or getting people elected to RIBA Council. So we're engaging in all of these things at many levels throughout the industry, hoping that we can create this systemic change and this cultural transformation that we're after. I think that's the end of my slides. I've probably gone over a bit over the time you allocated for me, Globe, but hopefully that's a good overview of where we are.
Yeah, thank you so much anyway, Sam. That's great. It's great to have you with us. Valerie, you might want to highlight what Scotland's up to so far and where we go next.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just share screen then. Okay, is that working?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, you've got to see my messy desktop there. So thanks very much, Sam, for that introduction to ACAN, and thanks again to everyone for coming to ACAN Scotland's first participatory event. So my name's Barry, and I'm one of the current coordinators of ACAN Scotland along with Glow. ACAN Scotland was one of the first regional groups and was set up during 2020 following a launch event facilitated by ACAN and the Scottish Ecological Design Association. Due to the circumstances at the time, we established this group in a purely virtual environment, which has actually worked very well for Scotland, as it's brought everyone together from all over the country and enabled us to engage with each other when previously some of us would have had to travel a considerable distance to meet. So we haven't actually all met in person yet, so we're looking forward to the first time that happens. The first thing we wanted to do that we started working on was to formulate our mandate. So we decided we wanted to further ACAN's 3 principal aims in Scotland. We wanted to build on ACAN's links with other organisations in Scotland who share similar ideals and an ecological agenda. We wanted to develop and manage Scotland-specific campaigns, which could sometimes also be an adaptation of a wider UK campaign. And finally, we wanted to work with and within the other ACAN groups to make sure that we have a Scottish voice present where it matters in any UK-wide activities. As one of the first regional groups, we see ourselves as embedded within the main ACAN structure, which, as we have seen, consists of several thematic groups, and we have many members who are also in other groups, so there is a good crossover. To that end, our first task was to examine the Scottish Government's climate change plan to better understand the future direction of policy in Scotland specifically, and how it relates to the wider UK picture, as we wanted to assess the current regulatory situation in order to determine what specific ideas for change are currently both necessary and desirable. So this process led to 2 main initial actions. We arranged 2 engagement workshops, one with the Scottish Government Chief Architect and another with an MSP of the Green Party ahead of their Holyrood manifestos earlier this year. And secondly, we've responded to several policy consultations focused on low and zero carbon heating in both new and existing buildings, which also touched on other key aspects such as fabric efficiency levels, EPCs as assessment tools, PAS 2035 and retrofit. And we then shared our responses with other groups in Scotland, such as the RIAS, so that we could have a coordinated approach. And aside from interactions surrounding policy, we've also recently started to build a social media presence to also help spread our messages. And we recently applied as a supporting partner to Salt Space, who are an arts cooperative in Glasgow, who applied for the Creative Carbon Climate Beacon funding. So although their application wasn't successful, we have made connections there with several other groups that we can continue to develop in the future. And all of this has led us to tonight and this collaborative event where we will all be discussing what works in effecting positive change. In terms of what's next for ACAN Scotland, at the moment we're working on developing several ideas into actions. We're making arrangements to continue to meet and engage with the appropriate politicians to try to interrogate their policies and drive action in the Scottish Government. We're going to review and adapt the excellent ACAN guidance on embodied carbon to the Scottish regulatory context. We're considering developing a campaign in relation to a national retrofit strategy, so it was really interesting to attend ACAN's existing buildings group event last week on the same subject. And we've talked about discussing the Descriptor review in relation to Scotland, which is an independent global review on the economics of biodiversity, which calls for changes in how we think, act and measure economic success to protect and enhance our prosperity and the natural world. We want to continue to collaborate with others to further a wider understanding of the essential need for climatic and ecological change. And one of the ways that we're looking at doing that at the moment is to create a series of events or pop-up exhibitions during and hopefully after COP26. So we're in the process of discussing that with some other Scottish groups along those themes. So finally then, let's move forward to the next part of this event and I'll get participating in some collaborative action. Back to you, Glo.
Thanks, Vary. That was great. Let me just share screen on the next section of our events, which is the Pecha event. I don't know if everybody's been to a Pecha before. It's basically 20 slides, 20 seconds for each speaker. We have basically the premise of this is obviously the main bit is like the second half for discussion, and but the first half is for these 5 incredible speakers. Well, actually 6. Sorry, 5. There were 5 presentations with 6 speakers as provocateurs for us tonight to start us on some thoughts. These speakers have all been working hard on certain aspects of climate emergency in their various roles. Without further ado, probably, since we're slightly over time, we'll start the process. The first, let me find this. First up is Scott McAulay. Scott is a climate justice activist, climate literacy educator, and the founder of Anthropocene Architecture School, which was launched at the 2019 Architecture Fringe, protesting architecture's inertia following the 2018's IPCC report. Scott supports architects, students, and educators internationally, acting as a catalyst to create educational spaces and resources to respond to a climate emergency and to cultivate climate literacy in the wider construction industry. Scott is placed in the RIBAJ Rising Stars cohort of 2020. So, Scott, when you are ready.
Yeah, fire away. So, yep, I'm pretty much here to talk to everyone about us having more agency in this space than we've previously been told. So this is why my entire talk is on the theme of you can, and taking the climate emergency seriously and taking action as well. And we'll also see how much I've kept to my 20 seconds per slide, which will be close. Right, so we now know that I'm not going to have to show any graphs, any tables. We know that climate change is a perpetual background noise to our daily lives. Every single day since 2012 had evidence of this. So children born in 2012 have not lived a single day of their lives unaffected by kind of impacts and measures, etc. as well. And probably my favourite quote in summing this up is from Niall McLean's last book called On Fire, The Burning Case of the Green New Deal. Because right now we're alive at the last possible moment when changing course can mean saving lives. And we cannot stress this enough, because our normality is based upon sacrificial lives, land, landscapes, and communities. So that really has to be reimagined entirely. So since launching at 2019's Architecture Fringe, 2 years and 1 day ago, the Anthropocene Architecture School has taken over spaces and momentarily occupied them to create spaces to really take climate change seriously, to cultivate climate literacy, and create places for people to share their expertise within the built environment and construction. So this is what 2 years of taking the climate emergency seriously can look like. So that is now, the Anthropocene Architecture School has been to 15 different universities around the world, across 4 different land masses, doing different workshops around activism, climate action, and really focusing on climate literacy and lots of different aspects of architectural practice. And one of my favorite quotes of all time that really ties to how important education is this one from Rethinking the Modern University. So as long as we educate young people into modern ways of thinking, we're just perpetuating a system that is destroying the planet. So that's something that has to be fundamentally reimagined and changed more radically than we have before. So what really started it was looking at how much do architecture students actually understand sustainability? How well are they being taught? So this initial infographic was developed from research before 2019's Architecture Fringe and shows that the optimistic self-assessment from students in 2019 was quite worrying 59.4%. So we had a little bit of a problem at that point. So in response to this, I ran the Crisis Studio project, where multidisciplinary tutor teams used students' projects as an armature to teach them the sustainable design skills they really needed. So you can be as provocative as you want, you can do lots of talks, but until education starts taking place, then we're going to keep on in the same space that we're in at the moment. So in response to COVID-19, the pandemics, putting things online, the climate literacy workshops I developed initially to teach people in person were digitized, and now 800 people around the world have been able to learn about these different aspects, and it's become so much easier to be light on our feet in response to the climate since then. This can also be done with students. So a project that ran recently was part of MSA Live 21, where the students were challenged that they had to teach climate literacies and the importance of the built environment in relation to climate change in a way that could be accessed by anyone. So there's a QR code you can scan and watch after this talk, because I can't cover it all in 20 seconds. And in defining climate literacy as well, this is about understanding not just what the impact buildings have, but the context they tie back into. So this was kind of defined recently. So it's linking the built environment back to climate change and how the built environment in turn exacerbates that. But not just this, we have to realize there's huge positive potential for buildings to do environmental good. And another part is we need to create spaces to share knowledge, to share what we're good at, to have that cultural transformation, to stop being me in my corner in my practice. Because if every single practice shared just their in-house CPD, we could transform the built environment sector pretty much within a few months. So that's one very easy action that could be taken. Another thing is that we can't just focus this on the professions. We need to have a public education, because until the public really understand the huge impact, that 40% of carbon emissions in the world that can be had, the political action is going to take more time. So we really need to be having that public education, taking our expertise out of the kind of ivory tower type silos. And then another thing that can be done is creating spaces for activists to engage with the public and professions as well. So this was part of the Extinction Rebellion Scotland Edinburgh Fringe residency, where we threw all these people in the same room and started to talk about problems together as well. And the most significant part wasn't the outcome, it was the conversations in between times. And climate change is incredibly emotionally wearing. So this is a response from students and staff from 46 universities in the UK. And it's really, lots of people are feeling a lot of grief, and that's entirely understandable. But we need to have spaces to openly talk about this. And we've not done that historically in the built environment at all. And activism doesn't have to look serious all the time. So the Lockdown Festival of Architecture that Peter Brooks kicked off last year really was quite playful and quite fun. So if that was entering a sinking house into the home of 2030, or talking about activism in a brand new light, when you give the public spaces to explore this, the responses always amaze you. And it's got to the point now, as Sam said, civil disobedience is becoming ever more necessary, because the political action required simply is not happening yet. We've seen from the CCC, even just today, saying that the government is very, very, very far behind on responding to their own commitments as well and recommendations. And in Scotland, we are very, very blessed. There are so many people doing incredible things. So as part of editing the RIAS Quarterly on Activism and Architecture, I had the pleasure with Andy Summers of really pulling loads of these together. You can read this online, but there are so many people doing great things, whether it be tenants unions, to community groups, to institutions. And activism doesn't have to simply be blocking roads or talking to your MP. If you're very good at writing, that's another thing we can do. So this is just looking at the press from less than 2 years of the Anthropocene Architecture School's work and all the different places that pick this up, many of them that would not take climate change into their readership very readily, but we got there anyway. And just to end, is that the reality of this is that if we're going to respond to this properly, climate and social justice has to be at the absolute forefront. So that means considering the earth and climate in every single thing that we do, as was said in this incredible book that I thoroughly recommend everyone reads. And we really need to think this about the choices we take and the political actions as well. I think that's me done.
Thanks, Scott. That is really well timed, actually. The next two people up in the double bill is Robin Webster and Ruth MacLennan. Robin is the immediate past president of the RIAS, the Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland, is a partner of Cameron Webster Architects and has spent much of his career in architectural education. Ruth is project architect in Smith Scott Mullen Associates in Edinburgh, working on a range of affordable housing and conservation projects. She is a trustee of the Edinburgh Architectural Association and convener of the EAA and RIAS Education Working Group. So when you're ready, let me know.
Hopefully we can stick to time.
Let's go for it.
Let's go.
Right. Well, Glo has already introduced me. I'm Robin Webster. I'm a practicing architect with Cameron Webster. We've done a lot of housing. I'm the immediate past president of the RIAS Incorporation in Scotland. And I'm being joined by Ruth, who is a more recently qualified architect and who chaired the RIAS Education Working Group. The RIAS is a member-led organization that represents most architects in Scotland. We have a number of expert committees that address important issues, such as practice, procurement, contracts, planning, sustainability, and architectural education. Ruth.
Hi everyone, I'm Ruth, convener of the EA group, as you mentioned. In 2019, our group noticed that the RIAS Education Committee was dormant, so we simply recommended it be set up again, and we did this because we believed the committee would provide us a higher platform for us to push for meaningful change. Following open calls, a group was set up in March 2020 as a task and finish group. Our task was review the current architectural education situation, gather information and develop recommendations. Over 8 months, our passionate group members volunteered their time to come together online to discuss, debate and collaborate. It was a lot of fun during lockdown. Through our research, we identified all of these missing links you see in that shot there, and we thought that this would really help the RIAS's position and Scottish architectural education output.
45, it's already been said, 45% of Scotland's carbon dioxide emissions come from the built environment and the construction industry. We've got to address this now, and as already been said, ensure we urgently put in place the knowledge and measures to reduce this. This is really important. Vitruvius said the end must direct the operation, and the end is to build well. But now we have to add and not harm the planet. Firmness, commodity, and delight, plus don't harm the planet. It's really fundamental. It's very important.
So we know why we need to educate ourselves to address the climate emergency, but how do we actually take action? This art installation by Isaac Cordell shows tiny figures huddled together in discussion despite being surrounded by a growing puddle. Our puddle is a climate emergency, and we need to form a plan of action through discussion, collaboration and sharing to get ourselves out of it. But there is a lot to do. And granted, it's not an easy thing to do, and we all have day jobs and families and life's busy. So you're not the only one that feels like you should be doing more or you don't know where to start. It can be a bit overwhelming. So how can we make it easy? If practicing architects had access to courses, to upskill and time to do so during their day job, what effect would that have? If more universities prioritise design briefs with existing buildings, retrofit, reuse, would our next generation of students emerge from education more ready to practice in a climate emergency? How do we share education between practitioners, academics and students so we all rise to the challenge at the same time? What's already being done? The EWG considered and debated all of these questions. We had a great time doing it and it was really engrossing. We gathered the opinions of 600 academic students, architects on topics like this in a survey last year, and our findings are in this report. It's available on the RIAS website, and you can also get in touch with us if you'd like a copy.
Also, the RIBA have a new editorial and professional development framework, and they're proposing important changes and a new direction to architectural education, emphasizing health, safety, ethics, and the climate emergency. The ARB, Architects Registration Board, are also proposing to reform the standards of entry to the register and the maintenance of competence. So we can expect more effective monitoring of this, and it's important that this adequately addresses the climate emergency.
How can the RIAS continue to help? If you're an architect, a student, or you're working in a built environment, the RIAS might be your membership body. It's our collective voice and a platform for a network to help us collaborate and lobby. So let's use it. Some food for thought. Should the RIAS Awards simply not recognise unsustainable buildings? We can all help to educate each other if we share our experience and knowledge. Students are keen to learn skills that will get them good jobs. Educators we spoke to want change in curriculums to assess climate emergency design and delivery.
And architects in practice and other construction professionals have to join up and step up and share and contribute.
The introduction of apprenticeships and more practice-based training featured in the survey. Also, 95.8% were in favour of an RIAS mentoring programme to support all levels of the profession. Could this be a way we get together, connect and learn from each other? We also found that architectural practices are keen to provide resources to schools. Schools and students are hungry for that involvement, but the quality of input and practice resources being committed is inconsistent. If you're an architect and you're involved with your university, if you aren't, why not?
Architects champion quality control. We need to ensure better communication regarding the appropriate ingredients and performance of buildings against standardized criteria and simple but flexible templates with data that can be easily compared. Architects can clarify how we can hit the targets for the construction industry for 2030. And the RIAS can and will help to coordinate the necessary training for graduates, practitioners, and the wider public. Got to take the public with us. And that's our presentation. If you've got any questions, we've got the breakout groups, which I hope you can join in and ask. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to push off, actually, because I've got another bloody Zoom meeting. Sorry about that.
I'll be here though, so yeah. Thanks everyone.
That's great. I've been to many a Pecha Kucha event that Gordon Duffy runs in Edinburgh, and that's the first double bill I've seen that's amazingly smooth and well timed.
We tried.
Thank you. It's great. So next up, as you can see, is Catherine Cosgrove. Catherine is an architect with more than 25 years experience and leads the sustainability group at Austin Smith Lord. She holds RIAS accreditation in both conservation and sustainable design, and she's the current chair of SEDA, Scottish Ecological Design Association. And over to you, Catherine, when you're ready, let me know.
Yes, thank you very much. Fire away, start the clock, please. It's a hard act to follow. Yes, I'm the chair of the Scottish Ecological Design Association, and we've been around for 30 years. When the next slide rolls over, you'll see that. We're celebrating our 30th birthday this year. We were always set up as an ecological design association for a wide variety of people. That what we're looking for is as broad a group of people as possible, because we can all learn from each other. So from the very first time it was started, we were encouraging lots of people outside architecture to be involved, and we have had landscape architects and artists, builders, woodworkers, all sorts of people. we are set up to spread information, to circulate the knowledge of our membership. We do it through design guides, we do it through holding seminars. We have green drinks nights when things are working normally. These are freely available resources on our website. We've already done deconstruction, air tightness and design to reduce toxic chemical in houses. There'll be a new one out shortly for indoor air quality and healthy indoor environments. We've also got a very good book about sustainable renovation, which is available free again on our website with the Scottish Pebble Trust. We've got a number of books which we are planning, but the one that we're coming up shortly will be about land conversations, and I will come back to that in a moment. We've covered an awful lot of the subjects that you're looking at in the groups in our previous conferences. Those resources are on our website. Please feel free to go back, have a look at the videos. Really interesting looking at how urban and rural have different opportunities and different solutions, but we can learn from each other from them. So there's a lot of interesting things might apply to your discussions tonight. We've just finished our 2021 conference, Time for Action. And I've said in the chat box, the standout presentation was Dr. Howard Dryden saying how we are polluting the seas. We will shortly have all of that available on the website. Very interesting. You might find it challenging in some ways. Earlier this year, we had a series of land conversation seminars, 6 nights, where we looked at specific things related to land use with a whole load of professionals from, I think it was over 60 people that we had involved from different aspects of land use. Very interesting to hear opinions from outside architecture, because there's so much happening and there isn't necessarily a consistent policy in Scotland. So we focused on different things through the 6 nights. The first one was the lie of the land. Really interesting that the land professionals were saying that there's an opportunity for change just now that everyone is quite excited about, and it's how they move forward with it. Soil and growth, again, very interesting, because there's so many things about the soil which is so critical to actually continue good health, not just of us, but of everything round about us. But there's so many things that we are saying, oh, we're going to use the land for everything, but we can't use it for the same things on top of each other. But again, lots of really interesting points of view. Ecosystems and energy, we've got to try and increase how we're renewably producing energy. Most of the places that we're planning to put wind turbines on happen to be the very good growing land. There's a bit of a conflict going on about how we use the land the best way that helps all round about. You know, that we're not using it predominantly for one thing to the deficit of many other things. Natural benefits, very interesting night about how, all the benefits we can get from nature, but all the other things that we are not aware that we're getting from nature. That was really interesting how that was tied to health in an awful lot of ways, but actually there are ways that you can build communities through nature. The new rural economy night, really interesting about how different ways of living can actually be economically successful. That at the moment there is a move towards joining communities together in a way that they give you the benefits of being in a city, but actually still get the benefits of being in the countryside as well. The last night we had was more of an artistic one, focused on a story for the future housing. It's not always a technical challenge. Actually, there's an awful lot of artistic benefits that you can bring to the learning aspect of things. But again, each of these nights all interlinked, so it wasn't just one thing all on its own. We'll have all the resources for that available shortly on our website. Ecological design, not a new idea. It's been around for a long, long time. We've got some quotes from a couple of the big thinkers in the 1990s that are built into our constitution, basically saying the best thing about ecological design is the consideration of everything around about you before you make any changes. There are key principles. Solutions grow from place. Understand what's round about you before you start changing anything. That's absolutely critical. And the more you notice, the more that you're less likely to destroy it. Well, I've managed to go a wee bit faster than the slides. Please go on. There are several other principles, go on, 5 principles. Ecological accounting, know where everything's coming from, know where everything's going, and then you can make ecologically sound decisions on what you're going to use. This is super critical. The building shown here, the Lilac low energy housing in Leeds, everything there was checked out for its supply chain and make sure that there was no off-gassing, there was no impact on the people's health, the people living in there. Design with nature, respect the processes that are out there, work with them, not against them. The Prisma building in Germany, which is more than 20 years old, was one of the ones that doesn't have an awful lot of mechanical ventilation and mechanical systems. It uses natural systems to be able to replicate what is now commonplace in offices. Everyone's a designer. Don't just think architects are specialists and know everything. Learn from everyone. Get communities involved. Ask them. This is an example of one in Switzerland, where they decided that they wanted to keep the local library. It was going to be part of the community. They wanted to overlook a playing somewhere where the children would play. There was an awful lot of things to do with community building that then fed into the design of the place. Making nature visible, very important, because the more you see nature, the more you understand what your impact is going to be. The Bosco Verticale is a very obvious example of that now, but effectively, if you can see nature and you are connected to nature, then you're more likely to be responsible for what happens with nature. Okay, that went very fast. Okay, that's me. Thank you very much. We could go on at this at length. Please join us in the chat room. We'll be focusing on land and ecology. So yeah, quite happy to take more questions and come up with more ideas. Thank you. Gloria, back to you.
Excellent. I need to turn on my mic again. I forgot. So thank you for that. That's really, really well done. Thank you. Chris Stewart is our next presenter. Chris is the director and architect at Collective Architecture, an employee-owned company and winner of the 2019 UK Practice of the Year. Chris is inaugural chair of the RIAS Sustainable Working Group and a director of SEDA. He leads a design unit at Strathclyde University and has lectured a number of schools of architecture in the UK and abroad. Chris, over to you when you're ready.
Yeah, oh, thanks, Gloria. I think I'm going to probably have to change everything I was going to say, but right, off we go. The RIAS Sustainability Working Group, it's kind of a little bit about the journey of that. This probably started about 2018 at the time of the new chapter, when there's just so many changes happening at the RIAS, which is really kind of important to us. It was a real kind of opportunity for us to think a bit differently about the way that the RIAS is set up. For me, really wanted to get sustainability as best I could at the heart of the RIAS. So we embarked on a road trip and we went around every chapter in Scotland and spoke to the chapters themselves and tried to encourage them to do that. And the way that we went about doing that was bringing to their attention that the RIAS actually did have a sustainability policy, maximum architectural value, minimum environmental harm, fantastic document written by Sandy Halliday. And we discovered that absolutely nobody knew anything about it. I mean, we took a poll of hands and it averaged about 5% of all the membership of those there knew about it. So we thought we have to do something about this. We have to set up something of ourselves. So we wanted to set up the Sustainable Working Group, but we wanted it to be a bit different. We didn't, you know, there's a lot of activist groups. We wanted to fill a different slot. There's also a lot of government groups such as Zero Waste Scotland. And these groups like Zero Waste Scotland, in some respects, they find it hard to speak out, whereas the activist groups, they find it very easy to kind of speak out. Whereas I thought we perhaps might be at a perfect position in that we could get a seat at the table and we could speak out in a way that the activist groups couldn't. And that's the real opportunity I thought that the Sustainable Working Group could have. We could be this kind of unique bottom kind of up group, but maybe acting like some sort of wolf in sheep's clothing, where we could speak like, you know, with some authority and actually physically get ourselves into these meetings and make some real influence. So we put together a remit, you know, to the RIS and said, what about setting this kind of group up? A lot of it might have been in small print, so I don't know if everybody read it all, but we managed to get that approved in the, we didn't manage, it was encouraged in April, and we came into being, which is absolutely fabulous with that kind of approach. And we kind of like took ourselves as a slightly different committee. You know, we don't really see ourselves as a committee, albeit kind of a kind of group. And we kind of like over 100 members, which is obviously pretty big for a committee. And we're not all architects. So all the people in the Sustainable Working Group aren't necessarily architects. We've got landscape architects and others in there. And we have workshops, we don't have meetings. And the reason we had, we're very much, and I must apologize for kind of like, you know, taking that statement from the suffragettes, but we're all about deeds, not words. We want to have actions. We don't want to just sit around doing nothing and sit in our hands. This is so important to us. So we're very much a group that has projects, and working, you know, on policy is kind of fundamental to us. And so we anytime we get the opportunity, we comment on every single policy that we can, working with ACAN and working with SEDA to put those consultation papers together. And here's just some examples of the ones we looked at. And I was very happy to see Robin here, because we know that working with Robin when he was president, we managed to write to the Scottish Government and try and help do something about the Circular Economy Bill, which is absolutely nothing in the construction industry about it, albeit that and we already claimed all these sort of huge proportion of statistics that the construction industry uses up. And also we've started now looking a bit more seriously, and we actually started to produce papers, and this one recently was produced by Matt Bridgestock, and is for the kind of like a paper that we put to the RIAS that we can perhaps now start to think about the building regulations and how they might affect embodied carbon. Going further again, we've got in principle agreement to think about the RIAS sustainable accreditation. How can we actually like open that up to everybody in the construction industry? Why can't clients, why can't landscape architects, why can't plumbers join the RIAS sustainability accreditation? Where it's obviously just in principle agreement, but that's something we would like very much to look at. And we work very much at grassroots levels as well. I mean, we've got Studio Up that we've been working with Scott and Chloe on, trying to think about how we could actually set up a kind of an incubator, that kind of where people can go and upgrade their skills, and working with others and mentors and produce that. And we've made grads for that. We work with institutions as well. Large institutions made a real effort to work with Scottish Water, and we're in the process of got in principle agreement to develop a community competition to look at how we share resources such as water across Scotland. So we're going to work with large institutions such as Scottish Water as well. We will collaborate with anybody. We now have a network of chapter representatives across all different chapters, a sustainable representative in each and every one of them, and they can speak and spread the word for us across Scotland through the chapters. This is a fantastic kind of organisation, the RIAS. It may be seen as one place with a head, but it's actually a place with 6 arms that spread out across Scotland itself. And, you know, we're of course working, I personally in Glasgow, so I work closely with the GIA, and we're developing Coring the COP, which is a series of sustainable blue and green walks encircling the COP26 campus, which we'll have available in map format for the COP26 come November. So again, we're going to tackle national issues as well. And of course, we can take those national issues and we can spread them across the chapters. And we know all the chapters now scratching their heads, thinking about how they could actually look at these maps and bring everybody's awareness of the rising water levels, seawater levels around the whole of Scotland, and use that to bring everybody together. And we'll work with other organisations, and we're collaborating very closely with the RIBA in this year's Smart Practice Conference, and how we can actually integrate that into the RIAS convention. So this is something we were very keen on too, is working with others and breaking down all these barriers that have been built up over the years. So very much about collaboration. So there's a little diagram to show you how we might work, but we're very much, we're about action. I wouldn't actually next say we're activists, but we're about action, and what we think we can bring is some sort of special position where we can bring a seat at the table and try and bring some of these ideas to the attention of others. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. I think we all feel like wolves wearing sheepskin now, sitting at Zoom rather than at a table, but nonetheless. Next up is Andrew Lieper. Andrew is a representative of Construction Declare Scotland region group, and is also principal engineer and net zero carbon leader at Max Fordham, a firm of building services engineers, passive house, sustainability and energy consultants. He's based in Edinburgh. So Andrew, over to you when you're ready.
My turn already, I'm really nervous. Anyway, sorry, yeah, ready when you are. Thanks, Glo. As you mentioned, I'm Andrew Lieper. I'm here as a representative of Construction Declares in Scotland. I also sit on the steering group for Building Services Engineers Declare. So in my day job, I'm a principal engineer with a company of building services engineers, passive house designers, and sustainability consultants. And my thematic title tonight is Declaring and Leading a Cultural Transformation. So the International Energy Agency reports that the global building sector is growing at an unprecedented rate. Over the next 40 years, the world is expected to build 230 billion square meters of new construction, which is adding the equivalent of a surface area of Paris to the planet every single week. So how can a global industry collaborate? So the scale of the climate emergency is enormous, and as other people have mentioned, at times it is mind-blowingly overwhelming. But all change really starts with individual action. Small groups of people working together can spark or fan the flames of change, and around the world, many like-minded groups are needed to help catalyze the global change that we need. So hopefully the tide is turning, and despite campaigns of misinformation, public concern for the environment is growing. We're all sitting here having this conversation. A YouGov poll for Global Witness from late last year found that majority in the UK, across all age groups, regions, genders, political party voters, and even both sides of the Brexit vote, want to see the British government leading change in climate. The global expansion of the built environment presents a huge challenge to everybody. The majority of the growth that's anticipated is in developing countries. However, the UK is the 4th largest cumulative emitter of greenhouse gases, so we bear a huge responsibility for our current predicament. We've prospered, and we need to make sure that we go beyond the minimum and collaborate. So I can't affect much change on the other side of the world, but I can influence those around me and at home and in my day-to-day work within the industry. So if we each adapt our approach, talking, learning, and sharing ideas, and importantly listening to others, then ideas will grow and develop, and problems will be solved. So Architects Declare was originated by Steve Tompkins and Michael Pollan and launched in May in 2019. So it quickly attracted hundreds of other architectural practices from across the UK. Architects Declare is about encouragement, with every signatory organisation expected to self-govern its own progress towards achieving the commitments it made. Different collaborative groups are needed to bring different perspectives. For example, CD's role has practice signatories. It's different to ACAN's with individual members, but what unites us all is a shared vision of a built environment that addresses the climate and biodiversity crisis. So the mission is a transformed built environment, which is planned, constructed, and operated within planetary boundaries. So under the wider banner of Construction Declares, the declaration has now spread to more than 20 different countries, over 6,000 practice signatories, and has been adopted by other built environment disciplines that have signed up to variations of the original 11-point declaration. So we all benefit from this unity and coming together. So professionals from across the industry and the built environment have come together and committed to the 11 pledges, as I mentioned, and many of these key pledges are included, focus on sharing, collaboration, and advocacy, all of which mean working together to raise awareness, advocate for fast change, share knowledge, and collaborate. So can a public pledge make a difference? Signatories to the declaration have changed the way they carry out their work. Polling of signatories suggests that over 53% of architects were not meeting the majority of the commitments for signing, and then polling in 2020 indicated that about 80% of architects have made progress. For building service engineers, polling has indicated similar numbers. So how does Construction Declare share knowledge? CD has hosted numerous workshops and presentations in the UK and around the world, bringing together a diverse range of voices to share learning and educate each other. The majority of these events are opportunities for groups or people to debate ideas and discuss approaches. Construction Declares campaigned and lobbied alongside many other built environment groups. I think that professionals organising across boundaries of discipline and organisation is very powerful, and organising large groups to respond to government consultations can have a powerful impact on development of policy and regulation. So in England, recent proposed changes to Part L were rolled back and strengthened as a result of strong industry feedback. So as I mentioned, we collaborate with many other organisations. The signatories contribute and champion the work of other industry groups and individual organisations. And the response to the climate emergency has spurred on many organisations to rapidly enhance existing knowledges and approaches. Architects are developing software for life cycle assessment. Structural engineers are developing parametric modelling tools. So what's my experience been? So we're a signatory to the declaration, and I work for an engineering consultancy. So for over 50 years, sustainable building design has certainly been a big part of our ethos. I haven't been there for all that time, but certainly in my experience, it has been the case, however, that in my experience, any particular job focus has faded in and out in different aspects of a brief. So in response to the declaration of the climate emergency and to help ensure we deliver on our pledges, we added a net zero carbon group to the practice, and zero carbon champions were created in every engineering team. So we've restructured our approach to help facilitate this approach to the climate emergency, low carbon design from the outset, and we're in the midst of embedding this approach in all our projects. So the public commitment for us means that we aspire to keep an unwavering focus on climate emergency in our day-to-day work. And this is the organizational change that we've been trying to spread throughout our teams. So this doesn't mean that there aren't compromises or that other brief priorities don't rise to top, but compromises are set in context against the climate emergency through dialogue with clients. So feedback from members of building services engineers declare indicates that client constraints, financial constraints, and knowledge levels can still be a sticking point. However, everybody has the power to do things better, and best practice should really be standard practice, and best practice should be possible within the constraints of any client's brief. Talking about the climate emergency outside of our designers' echo chamber will help. Collaboration with our clients who are commissioning our work is vital, and talking to them about the climate emergency and the consensus that's emerging on how to approach building design and how we can make the transition to net zero carbon is vital. Oh, I'm ahead of time. 2 points to finally finish on. Firstly, if your company hasn't signed up to declaration, then please ask your colleagues why not, and I'd encourage you to sign up. Secondly, I'd say that it's through collaboration and unity of purpose that we can ensure that we make every project we work on an opportunity to move towards a net zero carbon or a zero carbon future. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Has it gone back? Yes. So thank you very much, Andrew. That was perfectly timed and really engaging. I don't know why I haven't actually signed up. I really ought to. I'm working so hard with ACAN and I, totally escaped my mind.
I'm sure I'll be thanked if I can get one more signatory tonight, Glo. So sign up, please.
Yes, absolutely. All the things I forget to and haven't done yet. So the next part, let me just get my screen organized, would be the breakout rooms, and which is the main part of the event, as we all know. Share screen. Are we there? Excellent.
I think Nick was cut off mid-comment there in our group.
Yes,
I don't know what you were going to say there, Nick.
Oh, that was so quick.
welcome everyone, and thanks for joining in. I think if any other breakout rooms is like ours, we're nowhere near starting or finishing any of it. We only just started typing. So please do continue with the Miro board. Hover over to the other frames and put in any thoughts you might have to any of those prompts or questions, or related or unrelated, as it were, for future actions. This is clearly nowhere near long enough time to actually discuss what we want to discuss. However, what I'd like to ask is that each facilitator in each room to give us like just a quick best idea or best action, or that the room has come up with as a sort of quick report to the other groups to see what's been discussed. If we could start with room 1.
Yeah, Alex, would you like to do this, or would you like?
Yeah, I can do this. I was taking notes, so I've got my head into summarising it. So, yeah, we had quite a kind of interesting discussion, not necessarily too much around the questions, but just around general thoughts about how we can kind of promote or sell sustainability. So I suppose there was a couple of interesting starter questions around collaboration, and there were some ideas about how we could share design information, and a kind of question in our group around whether design information was publicly available through like planning portals or building warrant portals, and whether that could actually be used as a bit of a kind of resource for knowledge sharing rather than just being a kind of method of public record. And then we kind of moved on to talking about how we can kind of promote or sell sustainability as a value. And Sam kind of talked really interesting in a really interesting way about using the idea of health as a really powerful message at the moment. And around sustainability, sustainable buildings as healthy buildings, and kind of Scott followed up with the kind of idea of fuel poverty, and the fact that we can promote this as looking after people and as a kind of regenerative design principle, as covered by things like the living building challenge and other kind of metrics that look at sort of building as a positive act. And that's really about as far as we got. So
That's
it was
great.
a short but interesting discussion.
Yeah, that's great. Could we have Alex Little, the other Alex, or Chris? Chris, would you like to do government engagement?
Okay, then I'll do it. Alex was note taking. Yeah, well, ours was just like we got a clear action. It's quite straightforward for us. We jumped straight into policy making and whether there's any point, and it's actually so much good policy out there already which just simply is not enforced. So our action is to find ways to enforce the policy that already exists. We know there's plenty of it and it's being ignored. So, and this would include recent kind of promises through the that Nick has been working on, which I think was the sentence Nick was going to conclude, was the manifesto pledges from the MSPs through the recent kind of elections. So our idea is that we're going to like list out the existing policies, and there's a lot of them, and generally these will relate mainly to sustainability, and these should be listed out and how they might therefore be easily applied by people in the construction industry and should be applied. And find a way to place them. I would quite happily volunteer the RIAS website to list out these existing policies. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to do that, but that's something that the Sustainable Working Group could take as an idea that somewhere these policies that exist, that everybody should be using and should be applied, are listed out somewhere and they're easily kind of there. And rather than going through lengthy kind of policy, production of policy, which we know takes many years dragging its way through the courts and the governments. There's a lot of stuff we can just get on right now. So that is our kind of action. We would include in that too some of the kind of policies which are working their way through the Scottish Government at the moment, which includes the Circular Economy Bill and National Planning Framework 4. So there's the live ones that we're already kind of aware of, and we will pursue these, and we will make sure try our best to make sure they're kind of enforced and picked up.
Cool. I think Andrew Lieper, on the construction industry thing, keep it short. I think we're running out of time.
It was an interesting, I don't know if Fiona wants to summarize, but certainly I got, it wasn't really to do with the industry as such, but we certainly got onto power struggles and how do we get to those in power really in relation to affecting change or ecological change within Scotland, which was a really interesting discussion.
And Catherine and Mary, got some feedback on your group?
Yeah, again, I'll just keep it really short. We spoke mostly about rewilding in an urban context and water pathways and so on, and how we can integrate these things both at kind of macro and micro scale, and whether regulation should be part of it or whether it should be more ad hoc. And we had one example of someone who'd lived in Berlin for a while and talking about a kind of more relaxed attitude to letting spaces go wilder in an urban context, which was a really interesting point. So yeah, no firm actions, but just really interesting discussion.
Yeah, cool. Am I not? Education, Ruth.
Yeah, we had a good discussion. Definitely could have went on a bit more. I think we only got to our first question on how can we upskill on the day job. And Rose in our group mentioned that she was finding it difficult to find contractors that had the skills to build in a certain way. And we talked about those skills and what was needed. And we also talked about the things that we need to upskill. So time and clarity on what actually we should spend our time focusing on, because there is so much to learn. And that's about as far as we got.
That's great. I just want to say I'm posting the ACAN Scotland WhatsApp group link for everybody to join. Please do join us and take action with us. And thank you very much for everybody's participation. Because our time is so short, we're now going to the pub and discuss further. We're going to the Hope